Yarin Lokes had been in space for a total of 94 days, 7 hours, and some minutes he'd lost track of after the ship shook him from his bunk like a maraca. He woke up pinned under a half-collapsed ceiling panel, bleeding from a gash above his eyebrow, and with his left thigh screaming like it had been replaced by fire. "Ship status," he croaked, voice dry as sand. A flicker of blue lit up on the cracked interface screen nearby. "Catastrophic systems failure, hull integrity compromised, medical bay offline, navigation offline, life support stable for now." "Great. At least we're not dead," he muttered, then groaned as he tried to sit up. The crash, if you could even call it, that was more of a forced atmospheric entry followed by a partial bellyflop into what looked like a jungle. He'd been aboard the diplomatic shuttle, the USS Merryweather, en route to Delvern 6, a mid-tier neutral planet known for its obsession with bureaucratic neutrality and overly polite customs agents. The Merryweather had been carrying only 4 humans, but he didn't know where the other 3 were. "Pilot," he rasped, tapping his comms device. Nothing but static. He looked down at his leg. It was bent at a very wrong angle. "Okay, that's probably broken," he whispered, swallowing hard. He reached into a wall compartment that had miraculously held, pulled out a med scanner and ran it over his thigh. The screen blinked red. "Femur fracture, displacement detected, internal bleeding likely." Yarin gritted his teeth and hissed. "Well, that's not ideal." The Merryweather had crash-landed on what scans had identified as Ocranis 4, a sparsely populated planet with a breathable atmosphere and minimal technological infrastructure. The only intelligent life known to exist here was the Murnathi, a reclusive species that had, until recently, refused all off-world contact. As he dragged himself toward the emergency beacon, he prayed that at least one of the Murnathi had a medical background. 3 days later, Yarin was lying on a stone table in a structure that resembled a temple but smelled like antiseptic and overcooked root vegetables. His leg had swollen to the size of a watermelon, and he felt like he was half roasted from the fever. A tall, pale blue Murnathi with 6 fingers per hand and skin like translucent quartz stood across from him, arms crossed. "I am not trained for this," the alien said flatly. Its voice was deep but carried a strange melodic undertone. "You're the closest thing to a doctor I've seen." "You said you're a surgical technician." "I clean tools. I prepare rooms. I do not cut flesh. I do not repair bones." "If you don't do something, I lose the leg," Yarin said, barely keeping consciousness, "or worse. I will not harm you through ignorance. Then don't do it alone." "I'll talk you through it." The Murnathi tilted its head. "You will instruct me, step by step." Yarin's voice cracked. "You've got the tools, right? You said this place used to be an infirmary." "Yes, but our surgical methods differ. Bones are bones, muscles are muscles." "I'll adjust the instructions to what you've got." The alien hesitated. "This is highly irregular." "So is crashing into a jungle and getting left with a broken femur in an alien temple. Please, I don't have time for this to be regular." The Murnathi stared at him for a long moment. Then it moved toward a cabinet and pulled out a tray filled with rust-colored instruments. "Very well. I consent under protest." The next hour was a blur of pain, sweat, and instructions. Yarin forced himself to stay awake, guiding the Murnathi whose name he now knew was Kel through every step. "Okay, now clean the area with that clear liquid." "No, not the blue one. That's a sterilizer, not an antiseptic. The clear one." "Yeah, that." Kel's hands trembled slightly but followed the directions with focused precision. "Now make a lateral incision just above the knee." About 3 inches. Kel's grip tightened on the scalpel. "I do not wish to cause harm. You're preventing it. Trust me. Cut." The blade sank into his skin. Yarin gasped, his hands gripping the edge of the stone table so hard his knuckles went white. He kept going anyway. "Now retract the muscle. You'll see the break. It's going to look bad." It did. Shards of bone protruded at odd angles, surrounded by bruised tissue. Kel made a sharp exhaling sound, possibly the Murnathi equivalent of a gasp. Now align the bone, you'll need the clamp. That curved one? Kel picked it up and hesitated. Now, Yarin whispered, before the bleeding gets worse. Kel worked without speaking, following the instructions exactly. By the end of it, Yarin had lost a lot of blood and nearly blacked out twice. But the leg was stabilized, cleaned, and wrapped using what supplies they could find. You'll need rest, Kel said, washing its hands, and antibiotics. I've got some in the emergency pack, Yarin mumbled, his eyelids heavy. Can't thank you enough. Kel looked down at him. I have never performed surgery, you should not have survived. Well, Yarin murmured with a weak grin, humans are stubborn like that. Recovery was slow and unforgiving. The swelling took a week to go down. Yarin couldn't put any weight on the leg for nearly 6 weeks, during which Kel brought him food, helped him bathe, and even learned how to apply compression therapy using braided vines and mineral packs. At night, Yarin talked. He told Kel about Earth's hospitals, about the first time he broke his arm falling off a bike, about his sister Jalen, who was a trauma nurse in Denver. Your species entrusts flesh mending to females. Yeah, and males. Anyone who trains for it, curious. Our medical caste is bound by birth. Your caste system sucks, no offense. None taken. It does. They laughed more often as the days went by. Yarin taught Kel how to read human medical diagrams. In return, Kel taught him the basics of Murnathi anatomy, which was just different enough to be confusing but close enough to be fascinating. By day 48, Yarin was able to use crutches. By day 65, he could walk short distances. Then the shuttle's emergency beacon finally paid off. The rescue team landed with fanfare and confusion. They found Yarin upright, leaning on a cane Kel had carved, standing beside the temple where alien moss grew between ancient stones. Lieutenant Commander Lokes? The mission lead asked, stepping forward. We thought you were dead. Felt like it a few times, Yarin said, but I had help. Kel stood nearby, blinking at the humans with a wary expression. This is Kel. He saved my life. I mean that literally. The medics insisted on scanning him again, confirming the bone had healed well, the infection had cleared, and there was no lasting nerve damage. You did all this without a trained doctor? The lead medic asked, eyes widening at the notes Kel had annotated in Murnathi and English. I had a technician. And a very good assistant, Yarin said. Kel looked down, visibly uncomfortable with the praise. Weeks later, back on Earth, Yarin sat on a bench outside the Interstellar Medical Exchange building in Geneva. His leg ached in the winter cold, but he smiled as Kel, now dressed in an Earth-issued lab coat, stepped out beside him. I still do not understand why you insisted I come. Because you're going to be trained, properly, and because you saved a man's life under pressure despite every instinct telling you not to, that matters. I was afraid. Everyone's afraid the first time, the second. Sometimes the 20th. Kel looked at the building, then back at Yarin. Will they allow me to practice? They'll let you learn, one day at a time. Kel nodded. I talked you through your first surgery, now others will talk you through the rest. Kel didn't speak for a while. Then, I am ready to try. Yarin stood, wincing slightly as he shifted weight to his mending leg. Then let's go. Together they walked toward the entrance. The first thing Yarin noticed when he returned to the Ocranis system was how quiet the shuttle felt. No alarms, no rattling panels, no smoke curling from ruptured consoles. The air didn't taste like panic. He flexed his leg experimentally. It held. The cane still hung off his belt, but more out of sentiment than need. They'd returned with a team from the Interstellar Medical Exchange. 2 human instructors, one Seligari pharmacologist with a head that resembled a cluster of starfish, and a trio of administrative observers from the Murnathi high caste who hadn't stopped blinking in suspicion since disembarking. Kel waited for them at the base of the old temple, now repurposed with solar scaffolding and a portable sterilization unit humming near the entrance. You are walking without support, Kel said. The voice sounded the same, but the posture was subtly different, more squared, less guarded. Mostly out of spite, Yarin replied. How's the prep room? The sterilizer cycles have completed. Instruments are arranged according to the chart you sent. Did you label them like we discussed, in 3 languages? Yours, mine, and pictograms. Yarin nodded and stepped inside. The interior had changed since his last visit. Smooth, modular walls now divided the central chamber into 5 clean bays. A diagnostic console blinked softly in the corner, projecting a rotating model of Murnathi musculature. The human instructor, Dr. Reyes, peered over the schematic. This is better than I expected. I thought we'd be dealing with stone slabs and leaf poultices, she said. They still use those, Yarin said. But Kel convinced them to let us set this up as a pilot site. Kel adjusted the collar of the lab coat. It still sat too stiffly on the alien's shoulders, like it had been designed for someone with fewer joints. 2 hours into the first session, the tension became impossible to ignore. The high-caste observers watched from behind a transparent partition, muttering to one another in low tones. Kel's fingers hovered over a diagnostic wand, uncertain. They believe I should not learn this, Kel said without lifting their eyes from the screen. They're not the ones bleeding on the table next time someone crashes here, Yarin replied. You ready? Kel hesitated, then pressed the wand lightly to the synthetic patient's limb. The simulated tissue displayed a shallow laceration, complete with a slow ooze of red fluid. What's your first move? Assess depth. Confirm absence of arterial breach. Clean the area. What do you use? Kel selected a clear vial, uncapped it, and began to wipe with practiced movements. Antiseptic solution, non-reactive to Murnathi epidermal tissue. Dr. Reyes leaned in. Good. Now suture. Use the curved hook, not the straight one. Kel's hand paused mid-reach. Why? The curve follows tension lines better. You want the skin to close without puckering. Kel nodded once, then threaded the synthetic skin with careful, deliberate loops. Yarin watched the alien's jaw tighten with each pass. After the simulation ended, Kel turned away from the table and removed the gloves with a slow, deliberate motion. I still feel I am guessing. Everyone does, at first, Reyes said. The trick is to get good at hiding it. Kel looked at her, eyes narrowing. Your species finds humor in uncertainty, only when it keeps us alive. One of the Murnathi observers stepped into the chamber abruptly. He wore ceremonial bindings around his wrists and a thin circlet embedded with a small glowing stone, a clear marker of his status. You are altering the roles of our castes, he said, addressing Kel directly. This is disruptive. Kel answered without turning. I am learning to heal. You are a technician. I am still a technician, a better one now. The observer glanced at Yarin. You interfere. I teach, Yarin said. Kel does the rest. Your kind are unpredictable. That's how we survived our own planet long enough to leave it. The observer's expression didn't shift, but he withdrew without another word. Later that evening, inside the temporary infirmary's prep room, Kel quietly rinsed instruments beneath a sterilizing light. Yarin sat nearby, legs stretched out, watching the twilight deepen through the open doorway. They won't stop coming, Kel said. Then we won't stop teaching. They believe it is dangerous to redistribute knowledge. It is. That's the point. Kel placed the last instrument on the drying rack. You are not like others. Oh, plenty of humans would prefer hierarchy. We just argue about it more loudly. Kel leaned against the counter, arms folded. When did you first learn to cut? Yarin shifted slightly. Med school cadaver lab. Guy named Terk passed out during the first dissection, hit his head on the floor. We had to call another student to finish his section. This is considered normal. Very. Kel's gaze lingered on the drying instruments. I do not want to only clean tools anymore. Yarin nodded. Then we'll start training you on live cases. Kel turned sharply. There are no patients. There will be. 2 days later there were. A group of Murnathi farmers arrived from the northern hills, one of them cradling a badly swollen arm wrapped in damp cloth. The others carried baskets of dried root husks and a heavy jug of fermented sap. The injured farmer winced as he sat on the examination table. The arm was clearly fractured, with purpling skin and irregular swelling around the mid-forearm. Kell scanned it silently, then looked at Yarin. Displaced fracture, no open wound, moderate hematoma. Same arm I had, Yarin said. Kell didn't reply. Instead, the alien prepared a temporary splint using padded clamps and a flexible resin wrap. The farmer hissed in pain but didn't pull away. Yarin raised his eyebrows. "You didn't ask what to do." "I already knew." The farmer muttered something in Murnathi and Kell translated. "He says the sap is a gift for healing." Reyes stepped forward. "We'll need to monitor for compartment pressure. Swelling could cut off circulation." Kell adjusted the wrap slightly. "I will check every hour." That evening they sat outside the temple again, the crates of medical supplies stacked neatly beneath the stars. Yarin held up the jug of sap, sniffed it cautiously. "Smells like paint thinner." "It promotes fever dreams," Kell said. "Used during rites of passage." Yarin took a small sip and coughed violently. Kell blinked slowly. "You were not challenged to drink it. Too late now." They listened to the insects churring in the forest beyond. The wind carried the scent of wet soil and distant flowers. "I think I get why your people were hesitant," Yarin said. "Change feels like loss." Kell tilted their head. "And yet you change constantly, not always on purpose." A soft chime rang from inside. The diagnostic console had finished compiling neural feedback from the day's training. Kell stood. "Tomorrow we begin internal procedures." Yarin nodded. "We'll start with minor ones, drainage, debridement, keep it controlled." "I know." As Kell disappeared inside, Yarin looked up at the stars. Somewhere beyond them, policy committees would be arguing about cultural contamination. Philosophers would debate ethics. Paperwork would be filed in triplicate. But here, in this pocket of quiet revolution, one alien had learned how to stitch a wound closed and wanted to do it again. By the 42nd day of the clinic's operation, Kell had performed 6 minor procedures without supervision. None of the patients had been human. Yarin's presence remained the only one of his kind, but each new case brought a different pathology, a different physiology. The Murnathi farmers and tradesfolk had begun arriving unprompted, sometimes walking for 2 days just to have their injuries tended in what had once been a weather-stained shrine. The temple's original purpose had been lost to time, but its new role required fewer prayers and more gauze. It was mid-morning when a transport sled arrived at the clearing, carrying a wounded adolescent with a partially collapsed thorax. The sled was little more than a platform lashed to a solar grav pod, and the boy's breathing was shallow, his torso bandaged in woven bark strips that had bled through a deep violet. Yarin met Kell at the slab table as they transferred the boy onto it. His skin had lost its usual crystalline hue, now dulled and uneven, and each breath drew a faint whimper from under his cracked mandible. "Secondary trauma to the 5th segment," Kell said, scanning the chest. "Lung displacement. Internal seepage." "He was dropped from height." "Climbing accident?" Yarin asked. Kell nodded once. "He fell into a hollow trunk. The family tried to wrap him and wait. Too long. We've got maybe 20 minutes before one of those lungs collapses completely." Kell pulled the surgical tray from the wall mount. "I can intubate, but the drainage. I haven't done a thoracostomy." "I have," Yarin said. "You'll do it. I'll assist." Kell's eyes flicked toward the open doorway where 3 Murnathi relatives stood in total silence, their faces unreadable. "Not with them watching," Kell said. "They're not watching you, they're watching to see if he lives." Kell steadied their hands. "Prep the side. I'll go in between the 3rd and 4th rib." "Good. Use the bevel-tipped tube, the narrower one. You'll need to angle it toward the anterior cavity." Kell made the incision without hesitation, slicing through the outer dermal layer and into the intercostal space. A hiss of pressurized gas escaped, then a stream of thick violet fluid. He was bleeding into the cavity, Yarin said. Clamp and suction. Keep the tube in. Kel's shoulders remained still, but the tip of one finger twitched slightly as they inserted the drainage line and connected it to the portable vacuum system. The fluid began to siphon. The boy's breathing stabilized, rhythm returning to a steady pulse. Yarin tapped the monitor. Oxygen levels climbing, lungs reinflating. Kel stepped back. I didn't tremble. No, Yarin said. You didn't. They covered the incision site and bound the tubing to the boy's side with adhesive mesh. The boy's chest rose more evenly now. He was asleep, probably wouldn't remember the procedure. That was fine. It meant it had gone right. Outside, one of the relatives approached slowly, clutching a woven pouch. She pressed it into Kel's hands and bowed her head, not speaking. Kel opened it as she walked away. Inside was a tiny carving of a lung shaped from polished obsidian. I think that's gratitude, Yarin said. Kel closed the pouch carefully. They never would have brought him before. Not to a technician. Now they bring their children. That evening, after the last patient had been seen, a merchant with a deep puncture wound from a hunting spine, they sat in the back room, eating from a shared thermal pack of nutrient paste. I've been thinking, Kel said, shifting on the low bench, about how your kind learns medicine. Do you all begin with the sick and injured? No, Yarin said, swallowing. We start with cadavers, bodies donated after death. No risk of killing someone already gone. That seems efficient. Also deeply uncomfortable. First time I held a human heart in my hand, I dropped it. Kel raised a brow ridge. Was that permitted? Not really. But the instructor didn't notice. I picked it up fast. Kel leaned back, eyes flicking toward the ceiling. Our caste rituals forbid contact with the dead. They believe it carries echoes. Echoes? Patterns of the last pain or joy. It said the body holds memory even after the mind ceases. Yarin shrugged. Maybe it does. Still doesn't help when someone's bleeding out in front of you. Kel was silent a moment. I would like to learn from a cadaver. There aren't any here, I know, but I want to be ready, in case I am ever asked to teach. Yarin looked at him, surprised. You want to teach? I think I must. The next morning, the high caste returned, this time with fewer ceremonial bindings and no visible bodyguards. They requested without preamble to observe the clinic's full cycle. Kel agreed without hesitation. The observers followed silently through the triage, the minor wound suturing, even the midday decontamination process that involved rotating the solar panels to recharge the sterilizers. They asked no questions. At dusk, when the day's final patient, a fisher with a severe rash from aquatic spores, had been treated and discharged, the tallest of the trio turned to Kel. You have altered the function of your station. I have expanded it, Kel said. Function remains service, and the technician caste may choose to remain or follow. There was a pause. Then, this will provoke discussion. Then discuss. The Murnathi nodded once and left. No declarations, no reprimands. Later, as the stars thickened overhead, Kel adjusted the settings on the sterilizer, hands moving with quiet familiarity. I was never meant for this, Kel said. No one is, Yarin replied. We just pretend until we are. They stood in silence, the low buzz of the solar units filling the space where words might have gone. Then Kel reached into the drawer under the table and pulled out a small, rough object. It was a carving, this one of a human hand, palm open. Made of the same obsidian as the lung. I attempted to replicate it from memory, Kel said. It is not accurate. Yarin turned it over in his fingers. It's perfect. Kel tilted their head. Why do you all keep things like this? Objects that do nothing. They remind us who helped when it mattered. Kel returned to the console, powering down the scanner. Tomorrow I will begin training the apprentice from the southern ridge, the one with the burned fingers. Yes, she wants to learn wound care. Yarin smiled. Then she came to the right place. The lights dimmed one by one. Outside, the jungle pulsed with life, indifferent and endless. Inside the clinic, in the quiet that followed, the instruments were clean, the air filtered, and the slab table empty, ready for whatever came next. But for the first time since the crash, nothing felt uncertain.